Hey guys, Demetrius here. All right, I want to start to talk about advanced advanced nibble. These are not new ideas. Just like when we talk about nine ball patterns, I shouldn't be throwing new shots at you. It's not about secret knowledge, but it's about clarity. Clarity goes a long way. So I want to talk about advanced nine ball, and when I think of advanced nine ball, I'm really talking about how to get from 6 to 700 Fargo, because the road to get to 550, 575, 580, it's a tough road. But that road has to do with developing tools and improving at those tools. Developing tools, improving at those tools, learning the tools, and then getting better at those tools. But at some point, once you've learned the tools and developed some skills with those tools, it's really hard to figure out how to get better. And we're going to go into why people get stuck there. But what separates a 6 to 700 Fargo rate player? Here's what I've got: two player created balance beams per rack. Okay, so I break shots down into three categories. Sidewalks are shots that are like 95% plus. Balance beams are 75 percenters. Tight ropes are 50-50. It's not the tight ropes that kill people, it's the 75 percenters. And what's really, what's the word? Insidious is the word I was looking for. What's really insidious is that these are not shots that are that bad. In fact, these are shots that are here, it's not too bad. But those not too bads will eat you alive. So let's take a look. Two 75% chances. So if you have two balance beam type shots, two testers in a rack, well, cumulatively, don't cumulatively, that means you're roughly 55% to make both of them. And what that means is every time you're running the balls out, you're creating a coin flip. Like you're basically 50-50 whether you're going to bypass both, come with both those testers. So let's think about the math. A 600 player and a 700 player. So the 600 player is, let's just say they're 50% to run the balls out, whereas a 700 with the same layout is 90% to run out. Okay, and that's just those two testers a rack, 50-50 versus 90%. Well, what happens if they play 20 racks and they each get 10 opportunities to run the balls out? So this is kind of rough, but just roughly speaking, they each get 10 at-bats. So the 700 is 90%. They run 9 out of 10. The 600, they run 5 out of 10. But now, what happens to the remainder of the racks? So the 700, they're going to pick up 5 rebound attempts off the 5 racks that the 600 fumbled. And let's just say that, they run 4 out of those 5. Meanwhile, the 600 is going to get a rebound attempt off the one that the 700 fails. So they've got 1 attempt there, plus the one that the 700 fumbles back. So they might get 1 or 2 of those. They might get 2 more at bats. The one that the 7, and then anyway, we don't have to worry about the math. The bottom line is, roughly speaking, the final score is going to be either 14-6 or 13-7. Like that's how that plays out. That's just how that's how the maths. Okay, and with Fargo rate, 100 points means a player that's rated 100 points higher than another. That means on average they're going to outscore that player 2-1. Well, there's your 100 Fargo points. 2-1 right here. 14-6, 13-7, 27-13. That's a 2-1 score margin. There's your 100 Fargo points. And that's a big difference. So like 100 Fargo points, a 2-1 score margin. When you think about that, I mean, it's easy to say, but man, that person is twice as good as you are. Now think about a 600 Fargo rate player. Think about how good they play. Think about how good they shoot. Think about how many tables they can run. Think about how many jump shots they can make, and they know all the shots, and they can really put together some good performances. They can run 3 racks at 9 ball on a big table. They can get, think about that type of player. And think about what would it mean for that player? Think about how many years it's taken him to get there, how many hours, how much practice. Now, double that. Think about how much harder they have to work to double that performance. That's a lot, man. That's a real lot. But a 700 is doubled their performance. Their output is double. But here's where it gets really interesting. The 700 is not double their shot making ability. The 700's not double their braking. The 700's not doubled their jumping ability. In fact, this twice as good. You could have one player A could be twice as good as player B, but player A may not shoot any straighter. They may not have a better break, they may not have a better jump, they may not strike better. But simply by playing their patterns just a little bit better to where they eliminate 2 shots a rack that aren't that bad, but they're just a little off. They're just a little off. This game is a game of inches. And so you have, in terms of striking ability, you can have 2 identical players, and one of them will play twice as good as the other based on eliminating those 2 balance beams a rack. Okay, there's so many different ways I could explain this. I had this Word document I put together was extremely long. I deleted 75% of it, but there's so much more I could say. I could come at this from so many different angles. So by all means, we'll elaborate. Elaborate, yeah. Sorry, guys, I'm a little struggling with words. Why do people get stuck around 600? Why don't they see this? Why don't people see this? Because I see it I just see it. So there's a string of faulty beliefs that keep people plateaued. And the first thing I want to do is I want to walk you guys through this image here. Okay, I've got 3 cue ball locations, and I want to start with this one. I'm on a 9-foot table shooting this 9 of the corner. And the question, I like to play this game with my students where I say, suppose you had somebody that's only been playing pool for 3 or 4 hours. You've taught them how to hold the cue and make a bridge, and you've kind of taught them how to wiggle the stick back and forth. And they can kind of hit the cue ball so that they're not miscuing very often at this point. Maybe you've even given them some tips about, ghost ball or something like that. But okay, a 3-hour player. What is their make percentage on this 9, on a 9-foot table? Shooting from near the rail, shooting this 9 of the corner. They've got a couple, 4 inches off the rail. And if you look, if they're a brand new player, maybe 20%, that seems reasonable. Maybe they're 1 in 5, but on a 9-foot table pocketing that ball, they're going to get it within a diamond, but they're not going to make it very often. But now, let's just suppose they've been playing for a year. And of course, then the question is, well, how much are they playing and how are they getting instruction and all this stuff? But let's just assume that it's an average, passionate amateur. What I mean by that is they've gotten a couple, pointers from some players that know how to play that have showed them some things about fundamentals. Let's just say they play leagues, 1 night a week. They go to the pool room or go to their home table. They practice a few days a week, and then on the weekends they get together and play 1 or 2, 4 or 5 hour sessions over the weekend. Maybe they're a 15 to 20 hour a week player that's pretty passionate, watching a little bit of videos, stuff like that. That's a serious amateur. Well, in a year's time, what is their chance of making that 9? Remember, in the beginning, they start off 20%. But maybe after a year, they might be 50-50. Seems right. And then after 2 years of play, they might be at a spot where they're 75% of the time they make that ball. And after 3 years, maybe it's 80. Or 4 years, it's 85. And then 5 years, after 5 years of play, they're making that ball 95% of the time. Okay. 5 years of heavy play, serious, 5 years of play, yeah. Okay. Well, what about cue ball position B, where they're shooting from the kitchen line? Well, now, with 3 hours of play, they're maybe 10%, 1 in 10 times that ball is going to find the hole. That seems reasonable. And then after a year, maybe they're 27, 28%. I don't know. That's just where the graph takes me. But maybe after a year of play, it's 1 in 4 that they're going to hit the right side of the ball and send it in this direction, and maybe 1 in 4, and it's probably going to be fairly reasonable. And then one out of 4 it might go in. And after 2 years of play, maybe they even get it to where they're 50-50. After 2 years of play, this might be a 50-50 type shot. But then what happens is it doesn't keep going like the sidewalk. The reason this is a balance beam is if you look at year 2, they got it to where they're a slight favorite maybe. But then at year 3, what are they going to get it to? 60%? And then they keep practicing. And what happens? 65? 70? Maybe after 5 years of serious play, maybe they get it to 75% of the time. But boy, that's where it stops. That's where it stops. They're not going to practice this to 95%. And then going through this really quickly, then I think you guys get where I'm coming from. But this is important to me, so here it is. Trust me, I put way more time into picking these shots and making this graph. I'm not an artist, as you can see, but so you could take 5 minutes to watch it. So shooting off the end rail, again, starting off, they're like a Hail Mary, like less than 5%, maybe 5%. After a year, they're still a severe underdog, 20%. 2 years, they can't be more than 30% to make that ball. They're a severe underdog after 2 years of play. And even after 3 years of play, they're an underdog. And even after 4 years of play, they're still kind of an underdog to make that. And maybe with 5 years of reasonable heavy play and serious approach to the game, maybe in 5 years they're 50-50. But then that's probably where it stops. So what I didn't do is continue this graph. So let's talk about years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These don't change anymore. A 10-year player is still 50-50 to make that 9 ball. A 20-year player is still 50-50 to make that 9 ball. And a 10-year player is still 75% to make this 9 ball. Like, what happens is those make percentages, they flatten. They flatten. Because there's a limit to human ability. There's a limit to human ability. So you get better quickly in the beginning, as there's the steep end of the learning curve, as you can make rapid progress. But then as you start approaching the limits of as you start approaching the limits of what's possible by a human, progress it's not linear. It's the same thing. Like if I ran a mile today, it would be hard for me to run a mile, and if I did, my time would be terrible. But if I did it every day, like my times would get better by a minute, and like a minute a week probably for like the first month. I could probably go from like a 10-minute mile to an 8-minute mile within like 2 weeks. But then getting to a 7-minute mile might take me 6 months, and then getting to a 6-minute mile might take me a year, and then that's where it's going to stop. Like trying to get below 5 minutes would be like, it would not be 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like it's not linear. Okay, you get my point. So, but what this does, this creates the illusion. So in the beginning, people see that they're getting better at everything very quickly, and they extrapolate and they say, well, look at how much better I'm getting. Wait till 3 or 4 years from now, I'll be 100% at everything, because that's the trajectory I'm on. And then they just decide that they're on the right path, and they just need a couple more years, they'll have it all figured out. And then that doesn't happen, and they never really reevaluate, like, why didn't my plan work? I just wanted to practice till I made everything all the time. So one reason people get stuck is because they kind of concluded a long time ago that they were on the right path to professional pool. They were on the right path. I see myself getting better and better and better and better, and I know it's just over the next hill, I'll have it all solved. And they don't understand that that's what happens. So why do people get stuck? So they belief number one, here's some faulty beliefs. They conclude that they already know how to play. So reasons why they think they know how to play is, one, they decided a long time ago that they could brute force their way to the top due to the deceptive nature of the learning curve. So that's what I was just saying. But there's a problem. So here's one of my sayings. I've got some sayings I'll share. One I like to say, you cannot practice a balance beam into a sidewalk. You can't practice a balance beam into a sidewalk. I see a lot of people thinking that they're going to brute force those balance beams until they just don't miss them anymore. And, well, it's your pool journey, but that doesn't work. So why else do they think they know how to play? Well, let's talk about variance. Everybody has a performance range, and I didn't draw this graph out, but picture like a bell curve distribution of where you have your, most of the time you play close to your average. Some days you play good, some days you play bad. A 600 Fargo doesn't always play 600. Sometimes they play 650, sometimes they play 550, depending on how well they're executing. Another way to say that is, even if they're 75% on this 9-ball shot, some days they might miss it quite a bit more than that, and other days they might make it quite a bit more than that. So in the short term, if they're feeling good and they're confident and things are flowing right and they're comfortable and they're striking well and everything's clicking, there might be short sample sizes where for a rack or for an hour or even for a day, they might outperform, and they might hit these at 85% for one day. But then they might have a day where they're hitting at 65. So people have a performance inconsistencies. It's not a static performance. So what happens is people have variance in their performance. Nobody's consistent. So what happens if 10 guys that are around 600 Fargo sign up for a local tournament? I don't know what your local tournaments look like around the Twin Cities. We've got, we're not a small rural area. So we've got, if you played a local tournament, like a state, tournament here, we might have 2 or 3 guys that have Fargos around 700. You're going to have 5 or 10 guys that are pretty strong, Fargos, 650 to 680. And then you're going to have a bunch of guys that are 600 and and lower. So you got yourself a tournament, few 700s, a bunch of 680s, and then a handful of 600s. So how do the 600s perform in the field? Well, the 2 600s that are playing below average. Let's say there's 2 that play below average, 6 that play average, and 2 play above average. Well, the 2 600s that play below average, they lose out. They get busted out of the money. Maybe they win a match and drop 2 in a row. Maybe they lose their first match and then win a couple on the B side and then get eliminated. But they don't gash. All right, the 6 that perform average, maybe they win a match or 2 on the winner side, lose 1, win a match or 2 on the B side. Maybe they min cash. 64 player field, maybe they tie for 17th or something like that. Okay, but what about the 2 guys that are on their game? The 2 600s that are on their game. Those guys are crossing those balance beams and they're hitting the balls good. They're on top of their game. They're running through racks, and if they get out of line, they just make their recovery shots. They just spear them in anyway. And so those guys that are on top of their game, and then plus maybe there's some variance with the draw. Maybe they got a little bit of a good draw. They're hitting the balls good. But 2 of them make deep runs in the event. They get down to the final 4 undefeated. And then maybe they drop a set, and then they come with a good set on the B side, and they beat a 700. Maybe they scalp a 700, and they get into the Calcutta and finish top 4. So that's a pretty good run. Now, of course, what happens is all throughout the tournament, the 2 guys that are on their game, the 2 600s that are on their game, they're coming with so many balance beam shots, man. They're really feeling it. And they get jacked up off a rail, who cares? I'll just spear it in. They leave themselves funny, who cares? I'll just make it. Oh, I left myself a bank. Boom, I made it cross side, ha ha ha. And they're just coming with the recovery shots, and they're in gear, and they're outperforming the percentages a little bit. And then they get down to that 4th place, and they're in the Calcutta, and now they're on the live stream, and they're on the B side, and now they're playing another 700 player that's playing good, and it's a race to 9, and they're down 4-1, and then they're down 5-1 because this guy's running racks and not giving them second chances, and they're under a lot of pressure, and all of a sudden they're under a lot of heat, they're playing for a lot of money, there's a lot of people watching, they're on a stream, they're down on the score, and all of a sudden those jacked up shots off the rail, they don't just go in anymore. They start rattling them. And those testy little recovery shots, all of a sudden, they were making them all afternoon, and they don't go anymore. And people on the side rails are whispering, oh, I can't believe he made that. He was shooting so good. Man, he's such a good player. I'm surprised he missed that. I'm like, I'm not. I was just, like, this is just how it plays out. Like, I've been to a few tournaments. I've seen a little bit of pool in my life. Like, I'm just showing you, like, this is, just go watch. This is what happens. If you have your eyes open, this is what you'll see. So, but they could use that run as evidence that they're able to play as well as the 700s. So they could look at it and say, well, I beat a 700, and the other guy, yeah, he beat me, but I could have beat him, and he didn't do anything. Me and him, I mean, we're not that different. And because if they're looking to convince themselves that they're not inferior and that they want to be a 700, and so I think I can do this, and look at, I beat a 700, and I play as good as them. I split sets with them too. I just need to keep hitting them good, and my Fargo will go up. So if they're trying to convince themselves that there's no gap, they can do that. Of course, there's a penalty you pay, right? Is that you don't learn, you won't see your leaks if you're trying to convince yourself you don't have them. But okay, they know all the shots. Why else do they think? Why else do they plateau? Why else do they think I'm a good player? I'm a good player. Well, they know all the shots. When they're at 600, they know all the shots. So that means when they watch top players, they watch the top players, and the top players aren't using secret shots that they don't know. Like, yeah, he's doing that shot. He's doing that. I know. And so they're capable, they watch the pros, and they're capable of hitting all the shots that the pros are using during their sets. So, like, yeah, I know all that. And then they can also predict what the pros are going to do the majority of the time. Oh, he's going to do this, and he's going to bounce out there. Yeah, that's what I would have done. Yeah. So they could feel like, well, I mean, they're not doing anything I can't do, and they're just doing it the way I would have pictured it. So then what they kind of feel like is, well, I'll come right back to that. And then, of course, I've mentioned this before, but for newbies, people steer with their feelings. So when people are having their best days, those 2 600s that are on top of their game where everything's going in, those days feel really good. They feel invincible. And then their worst days, though, where everything's not going in, those days feel terrible. And so instead of thinking about trying to improve their average performance and trying to improve their skills and instead of trying to look at the skills, between their average game and the average 700 game, and then try to raise their average and raise their baseline. Instead, they're just like, no. When everything's clicking, man, I play really good. It feels so good, and I'm competitive. I just need to do that all the time. I just need to play my top 10% game every day. Every day I need to play my top 10% game. And they think, well, that's what the 700s do. The 700s, they don't play any better than me because when I'm at my best, I play just like them. They're just more consistent than me. So I just need to play my best game more often. And really what it's about, though, is it's about feelings, which is they feel so good when it's clicking and they feel so bad when it's not clicking that they're not really worried about their skill level and their technical, how well they're playing. They're more worried about, am I playing good or bad for me? And they just want to play at the top of their range because it feels good. And so they're like, how do I get it so I just always want to play above average? That's all I want, which I've talked about doesn't make any sense. So all of this leads to, this whole I know how to play, I can play just like the 700s, that leads to, so the first belief was I know how to play, which leads to the second belief is I just need to be more consistent. I just need to be more consistent. Of course, I've talked about this. It's absolute nonsense because the 700s, they're not consistent. And there's days where they play like 760, and then there's days they play like 640. So the difference is that they play so well that even their average, they don't need to be at their top 10% of their game to play a 700 speed. That's just how they play most of the time, unless they're, the 20% of the time they're way below their average. So there is a difference, and everybody has the same performance range. I've talked about it. Even the pros have the same performance inconsistencies. It's just people they see it. People don't see that the pros are inconsistent because the pros are always playing better than they play. So from their vantage point, they're like, well, they're always playing better than me. But they're very inconsistent, and everybody's inconsistent. So the answer is not consistency. The answer is improving your entire performance range by actually improving your game. And of course, I've already said in the beginning, that's about learning shots and improving at those shots. And then after you max out those shots or approach the limits of those shots, improvement really hinges on eliminating missable shots, not getting to where you can't miss missable shots. Okay, so the whole I need to be consistent. So I know how to play, I just need to be more consistent. I know that when I'm playing my game, I play just like the pros. You know what? I know what they're going to do before they do it. And when I'm on my game, I can do it too. It's just about consistency. The pros are just more consistent than me. And then they conclude consistency comes from fundamentals. They've put in more time. They're just more fundamentally solid. They've put in more hours than me. So they just strike the balls better. I mean, I know everything they know. They just physically can do it more because they're more consistent because they put in more time. And so they conclude one of two things from here. Time. I don't have the time. This is what they say. I know how to play. I can do everything the top players do. When I'm on my game, I get similar results. I'm just not as consistent. And I know this comes from fundamentals. They're just more fundamentally sound, so it comes easier for them. If I had time to put in the game and could spend 10,000 hours working on my stroke, I know I would play just like them. But I'm a busy guy. I have to work and 10 kids. So I'm as far as I can get with my game. So they just tell themselves that's the difference between me and them is I don't have time to turn myself into as technically sound as they are. But what about the people that tried? What about the people that put in endless hours trying? Well, for them, they can't say I don't have the time. So they conclude, well, I guess I just don't have the talent. I mean, I know how to play. I can do everything that the top players could do. When I'm on my game, I get similar results. I'm just not as consistent as they are. I know that comes from fundamentals. They're just more fundamentally sound, so it comes easier for them. I've put in the work, so I know it's not just time. It just never got easy for me the way it did for them. I guess some people just have it. Some people just have a natural talent, and I guess you just need that to get to the highest levels. And if you ever want to find a body of people that are going to make a big argument about the talent, about whether talent's real, just find people that play 600 speed, that have spent 10,000 hours working on their fundamentals, and you'll have yourself an army of people that are willing to tell you that there's this mythical talent that some people have and some people don't. because what else could it be, right? Okay, wrong. It's all wrong. This is all wrong. This is why people get stuck. These beliefs form a cage. This idea that someday they're going to get to the top where they make everything all the time, that's a cage. The idea how good they feel when they're at the top of their performance range, thinking that that's how they just need to be able to play like that all the time, and that's how pool should be played, is how they feel at their best, is how pool ought to be played. This idea that they know what the pros know and they just need to get more consistent. All of this is all just illusions, and it's like it's not the right model, and so that model cages people, and what that leads to is striking, people working on their fundamentals, people working on their striking, people trying to practice balance beams until they become sidewalks. That's what I see. I go into pool halls everywhere. I see people trying to practice balance beams until they become sidewalks. And I deleted something out of here. I told it on a podcast the other day, but of course, somebody might be watching this. You don't know. It could be 2040 when you're watching this. So I'll just tell you, I had a student here last week, and he told me that all he really needed to just work on his break. He was a 600 fargo. He said, I just need to work on my break. That's where I really need to grow. And I had him play 10 racks of 6-ball ghost because that has nothing to do with the break. I'm like, okay, so you play good after the break. Okay, let's see it. And of course, pressure and momentum and all this stuff, 9-foot table, some tough layouts. Of course, it was predictable, right? He runs out 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10, he ran the 6 balls out. The other 9 times, he was getting hooked and missing balls and just negative momentum. Just didn't get going. But in his mind, he just needs to work on the break. And so it's like, because people don't see what the road after 600 is. They know the shots, and I could show examples. I could set up, I actually deleted all this crap because I got to steer a little bit. I can't. I'll get more into the examples next video. But I could show you layouts of stuff that he did where I'm like, I could see the percentages, I could see the balance beams, and I could see the math, and I can see how this trends towards the results he got. But other people can't see it. And so to me, if this seems obvious to you, good. But it's just like watching, it's like when I say it, you're going to nod along and say, that makes sense. The same way that when a guy watches a pro run out, he'd be like, yeah, that's what I would have done too. Like, I actually joked about it when Jason Shaw ran his 832 in straight pool. I happened to catch the last hour of that live. It was phenomenal. And after Jason ran his 832, if anybody finds the chat, if it's on YouTube somewhere in the chat history, you'll see my name, because I put in the comments, I'm like, yeah, when I saw him run those 832, I couldn't help but think, that's what I would have done too. Like, I would have run them the same way. Like, yeah, that's what I would have done too. It was such a funny line, because I'm like, that's what people say though. People watch this stuff. They watch the pros run out. They're like, yeah, that's what I would have done. But I've seen you play. That's not what you do. And the pros are doing things different, but you don't notice those differences because you don't even know them. So how are you going to notice something if you don't even know it exists? So I'll be going into what those things are that the pros do that most people don't do. And the other piece though is that, so I'm kind of joking about, that's what I would have done too. So the same way I can tell you all about this and the 2 balance beams a rack and all these percentages and how it works. And people are like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But then how come I go in and they're practicing their long straight shots, and how come when they play they still create 2 balance beams a rack? If they understand all this, they wouldn't do it. So don't tell me. Where's the camera? Don't tell me. Yeah, I know that makes sense. If you're the guy that, okay. It's okay. You're on my team. Let's go. Tree of trust. Bring it back. It's amazing to me how people nod as if this is obvious, because it's like the answer to a riddle. It's always obvious once you hear the answer. I'm telling you, there's an army of people that have spent 20, 30, 40 years of their life trapped at 600 Fargo, beating their head against the wall. And so if it was that obvious, that's not what you would see. So I'm trying to show you guys the path. So the road to 700 is minimizing player-created balance beams. That means not leaving ourselves shots or positional plays that aren't routine. A balance beam can be a 75% shot. It could also be a 75% cue ball maneuver. It just doesn't scale. So it's no longer learning new shots or improving at the shots. It's limiting ourselves to shots that are repeatable. So people want consistency. Of course, you can't be consistent, but people want consistency. But consistency can't come just from striking. Consistency has to come from patterns assembled with shots that can be executed consistently. So you want to be consistent? Okay, here's the deal. You want to be consistent? Run out, and you only get to shoot shots that you can do consistently. If you use a positional play that's like, well, maybe I can get there, that's not going to be consistent. If you leave yourself a shot that maybe you can put down, that's not going to be consistent. So if you want to be consistent, you can only use shots and cue ball maneuvers that are very, very, very repeatable. That's it. That's how it works. And so I like to say the first half of your pool career is learning new tools and getting better at tools. Learning those tools, learning new tools, developing your tools. Learning new shots, developing your shots, improving at the shots. Learning new shots, improving at shots. And then the second half of your pool career is putting them all away, everything away. So this graph here, in the beginning, you have to max out your percentages and everything. You have to learn how to make long banks. You have to learn how to make testy cuts from the kitchen. I mean, of course, you have to learn all these shots. So it's learning shots and improving at shots. Learning shots, improving at shots. The first half of your pool career is getting everything up to here. But then the second half of your pool career is firing all the blue and red shots and only allowing yourself to play pool in the purple. Okay. Zach had asked me, if the percentages, what was his exact wording? He asked me, do the percentages does the zone of what's a balance beam and a sidewalk and a tightrope change based on skill level? So like, do better players have bigger tightrope zones or bigger balance beam zones and bigger sidewalk zones? And I'll get more into that. My first inclination is to say, not really. We all have the same zones for sidewalk, balance beam, and tightrope. But what I will say is that there are people who aren't as good at them. So if somebody that's 2 years leaves themselves a balance beam, 2 years into play, they leave themselves a balance beam shot, they might only be 50-50 on it. In my mind, it's still a balance beam. They're just not as good at that balance beam as you are. So the difference is, let's suppose they leave themselves a shot that for you, Zach, would be a sidewalk. They leave themselves a 75% shot, but they leave themselves a 95% shot, but they're only a 2-year player. So they get themselves positioned to where you'd be 95% to make that ball, but they're only 75%. Well, now they fail to pocket that ball. The question is, was it a cue ball positional error or was it a striking error? And so I would look at it and say, boy, they left themselves a shot that you would be happy with, but they just haven't gotten their sidewalks to 95% yet. So I would consider that a striking error. They need to improve their execution. On the other hand, if they leave themselves a balance beam shot and they are 75% to make it, but they fail to pocket that ball, if it was preventable, I would look at that and say that was a positional error. They left themselves a 75% shot. It's going to miss sometimes. They missed. That was a cue ball error. So I think everybody's zones are the same, but not everybody's maxed out their percentages yet. So some people still have a lot of meat on the bone as far as developing those tools. But once you've developed your tools, they cap out at a certain place. And so what I would say, Zach, is that all of these zones are the same for everybody, but some players just haven't maxed out their equity on those shots yet. They're still working on, and a lot of us, we have to burn it on both ends. It's not like you work on one and then you switch. It's like you approach the flat line, and then you keep working on this stuff to keep it in making incremental improvements and to stay sharp. But then you also start working more and more on staying on sidewalks. So, and then of course it could go a little further too, like Federer and Filler. They might have shots like that shot from the kitchen where they're shooting that ball that's in the rack area. They might not be 75% on that. They might be 90% of that shot. And they might, 85. And so they all of a sudden it's like, well, Demetrius, you said you couldn't practice a balance beam into a sidewalk. It's like, well, number one, they're not making it 95%. It's still a balance beam for them. It's still a tester. And under pressure on the Mosconi Cup, they don't have to put it down. And the other part is that if you have to look at the number one or number two player in the world and look at guys that are legitimately full-time players for 10 years that are world champions, if those are the guys you're going to go to, and even still, this still holds true, it's just the gap between the balance beam and the sidewalk isn't quite as significant, and those percentages don't cost them quite as much. But so even still, everything I say is true. It's just instead of being, if they create two balance beams a rack, instead of being 75% times 75%, instead of being 55% to get out, maybe they're 85%, 85%, and they're 70% to run out instead of 55. So like the percentages are just a little bit better for them because you've got a handful of top strikers in the world that have developed their balance beams to 80-85% and have fought 5% past what I think of my human, what my human limit is going to be. So there's always stuff you could say about that. So in theory, their balance beam zone, you could say if you're a top 10 in the world, it could be a little bit bigger. And of course, for beginning players, you could it would be weird though to say their sidewalk zone is really small. A better way to say that is I would just say we all have the same zone sizes. They're just, most players are on the front end of their learning curve as far as developing their tools. And that, yes, there's a handful of players that could outperform these percentages slightly. But basically, the zones are all the same size, and that really helps you figure out, are you making striking errors or cue ball errors? And we're going to get into more examples of where those zones are and what they look like. Okay, falling out of line. Making a recovery shot and running out, it doesn't make it okay. So it doesn't erase the mistake. So if you get yourself out of line and then you come with the recovery shot and get through the run, now it scores you the point, and that's your job. Once you get out of line, that's your job. Come with it. Recover. Good on you. But when it comes to improvement, when it comes to studying and trying to get better, getting out of line and making a recovery shot is not the same as not creating that recovery shot, because that can't be repeated and those percentages will catch up to you. So when you're in the moment, once you're out of line, of course, recover. But just know that there's a difference between leaving yourself a hard shot and coming with it versus staying in line. One, who do you want to bet on? The guy that gets out of line twice a rack and gets through some of the racks when the gear is right versus the guy that keeps it all easy and there's nothing to even root for when you're in the chair. It's just not even close. It's not close. So it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it okay to play sloppy pool, the fact that you can get away with it sometimes. And I've talked about this, but I'll say it here. I don't evaluate runs as pass-fail, like I just said. If you get out, good job. If you don't get out, ooh. I judge them based on downgrades. So how many player-created balance beams or tight ropes are there? If there's a run that could be done with all sidewalk, and you create 2 balance beams, in my mind, that's 2 downgrades. Or if you create a tight rope, that's a downgrade. That's a double downgrade. And so, if somebody creates 1 balance beam, I give that rack, maybe whatever. I don't need to translate to letter grades. I just think in terms of downgrades. I try to stay on sidewalks. That's it. Stay on sidewalks. Win money. Easy game. So, and I've already said this, when I work with beginners and intermediates, it's about building and practicing their tools. Building and practicing their tools. So for the beginners and intermediates, I would say I'm teaching you guys these move shots and these core shots, core shots 1 and 2, the hold shots, core shots 3 and 4, the move shots. These shots that I'm teaching you and the ability to play those shots with the right spins to hit the right targets, those are the sidewalk maneuvers. Those are the tools that we need to build ourselves a powerhouse game. So for the intermediate players that are kind of like, wow, how do you I can't even run a 9-ball rack, much less try to worry about running it out perfectly. Great. Let's look at your game. Let's look at my toolbox and let's see which of my tools do you not have, and let's work on those tools. That's what I'm doing with them. So for everybody that's 400, 500, whatever Fargo, that's why we're working on those tools and techniques to build those tools that you're going to need. But then at the advanced level, once you have those tools, all the 600 players that know all these shots, like, yeah, Demetrius, when do we get to the good stuff? We already know all these shots. What else do you got? Well, I'm not going to show you more shots. At the advanced level, it's not about learning more shots. It's not about getting better at those shots. Now it's about learning to assemble those shots correctly so that you stay on sidewalks. That's what it's about. How come if you have all the shots, I just know, I've played a lot of pool and I know how people play and they create more balance beams than I do. And so then that's it. And it's hard to see, guys, because when I run out, you're going to look at it and be like, yeah, that's what I would have done too. And so we got to zoom in on, then how come it's not the same? How come it's not the same? Well, then why is my Fargo if it's the same, then why is it different? You know what I mean? So there are things, I see it, and so this is my overview. I just wanted to sketch out the problem. I wanted to sketch out balance beams, tight ropes, sidewalks. I wanted to talk about the beliefs, why I wanted to really make it clear that 2 balance beams a rack. If you're a 600 player, if you know all the shots, and you're trying to figure out advanced 9-ball patterns. Advanced 9-ball is about eliminating the recovery shots from your runs and eliminating those 2 balance beams a rack. I wanted to show you the beliefs of why people get stuck where they get stuck, and why you always see people trying to practice their balance beams into sidewalks because they just want to get to where they're striking good because it feels good, and they think that they're going to brute force to the top, and they think that they just need to be consistent, and they think they already know it all. So like that's it. That's why people get stuck. And then in the end, once we know that it's about assembling, firing all the balance beams from our run out and sticking to sidewalk shots, and if I can get you hungry to realize that just those and it's the little ones where you're like, oh, I'm not so bad here. I'm not so bad. I'll give you a little foreshadowing. When do you know you're on a balance beam? I talk about this like it's really when I'm trying to figure out where the sidewalk zone is for a position. And when I do this with my students, and Zach, I'll tell you, they're very good at knowing where the edge of the sidewalk zone is. If I'm like, how far back can you be? How thin can you be? You still really like it. Everybody knows where it starts to get uncomfortable. It's amazing. People really know. Like, we see these zones very similarly. And one thing I like to joke about how do you know when you go from a sidewalk to a balance beam? It's when the voice in your head jumps an octave and you start reassuring yourself that it's okay. So if I'm playing shape for the 9 ball and I get straight in, I'm not thinking, this is good. I'm just like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, good. That's what I'm thinking. My thought process, I get straight in on the 9, I'm like, awesome. But now say you get like out in the middle of the table and you got to cut it in. It's a little bit thin. Now all of a sudden you're like, well, I mean, this isn't too bad. I could, it's like, look, what happened to your voice? You jumped up an octave and you're starting to explain to yourself, I mean, this isn't so bad. I should still be able to, I should be okay. So when you jump up and you start jumping up an octave and explaining to yourself that it's not that bad and I should still be okay, that's when you know you're on the balance beam. Because if you're on the sidewalk, you don't have to go through all that. When you're on the sidewalk, you're just like, awesome, I'm where I wanted to be. So that's how you know. Don't put yourself spots where you have to reassure yourself. All right? Okay, so in the next video, that's a quick recap. In the next video, we're going to really start going into how do we look at 9-ball racks. We're going to start looking at 9-ball racks and what are the skills we need to do to start assembling sidewalk pool. Now, of course, with the player reviews we do, with the pattern reviews we do, the ghost reviews I do, I'm hopefully showing you a lot of different real examples of how I do that and how I think about that. But we're going to look at the concepts from a high level and then look at them in gameplay as well. So that'll be when we start, that'll be part 2. This is part 1, overview, the road to 700, eliminating 2 balance beams a rack. Now we know our goal. And then the next video is going to start talking about open 9-ball racks and specifically how do good players do it different than intermediate players to do that. Okay, great. See you next time.